Florida Congressman Greg Steube sits on the House Foreign Affairs Committee. Joins me now with reaction to Biden and NATO's latest attempt to try and end this war. Congressman, what say you? We're going to hit them with more sanctions. We've been doing that for weeks now. We're almost a month into this. It hasn't done anything to really, in my opinion, stop Putin so far. He doesn't seem to be pulling back because of the sanctions. Did we maybe approach this whole thing incorrectly 29 days ago before it started? Because that's what I'm thinking.
Well, we should have been doing sanctions long before now. We should have been doing sanctions in 2014 when they took over Crimea in violation of the Budapest Papers. But the Obama-Biden administration at that point in time decided not to do that.
Great point.
But what is currently happening in this administration, by negotiating a deal with the Iranians through the Russians and the Chinese, any sanctions that the Western world puts in place, Putin and the Russians will be able to avoid those sanctions by going through the Iranian deal that the Iranians have already said they're going to use a Russian company to build these oil fields and other oil processing plants if this deal were to go through, which if you read current reports, it's talking about they're very close to an Iranian deal. Why would you be negotiating using the Russians and the Chinese to negotiate a deal with the Iranians, again, the largest state sponsor of terror in the world, to give them a path to nuclear war and allow the Russians to avoid the Western sanctions that Biden just today stood up on a podium and so proudly talked about how tough their sanctions are, while not talking about the deal that they're trying to negotiate with the Iranians that would allow the Russians to completely bypass whatever sanctions the Western world puts in place.
Yeah, well, Greg, because
egregious.
That's called political theater, because that's what this regime does. That's what many politicians do and have done on both sides of the aisle. I don't feel you're one of those guys, but there are many in our party that do that. Let's be real. And Biden, of course, one of the worst offenders of political theater, minus his gaffes, at distracting people. Hey, look what I'm doing over here to help the innocent refugees. While on the backside, we're making a deal, one of, as Trump put it, one of the worst deals ever in foreign policy. And it looks like we will be back into that Iranian deal very soon. Every report, every person I've had on, we've had former ambassadors from Israel on this program say they're this close to signing it. It's going to happen. I mean, anyway, let's talk about the money.
It would only be disastrous for the United States, but it would be disastrous for the Middle East and our allies.
Our allies. Yeah, Israel's pissed about it, and they should be. Saudi Arabia is not happy about it. Why would you want to re-sign this deal and embolden Iran and allow them to make money again and coordinate with China and Russia for oil and natural gas? I mean, it makes no damn sense. But speaking of money, let's talk about my money and your money, our money. Greg, this new billion that he discussed today, is that another billion on top of the, because I get confused, you know, they just keep printing money. Is that another billion on top of the 13.6 that was in the omnibus that they rammed through a week and a half ago, and on top of the 800 million that they pushed out last week? That's another billion?
That's a great question. Of course, Congress wasn't consulted in that decision, and maybe that's $1 billion that the president just has, that he has the authority through the State Department to allocate. I'm assuming that that's what this money is, but you're right, on top of the $14 billion that was allocated by Congress 2 weeks ago, in an omnibus bill that was another several $1 trillion that I voted against, on top of the $1.2 trillion in infrastructure, the $1.9 trillion and the COVID relief bill that Biden passed when he first got elected, on top of the $11 trillion we spent in the last 2 years. And oh, by the way, we only take in $3.5 trillion a year, but nobody seems to care about that. And they wonder why, Democrats wonder why we're seeing record inflation. It's because they've dropped trillions of dollars on this economy in just a short period of time. And just in the 2 terms that I've been in Congress, the deficit's gone from 21 trillion to now over 30 trillion. And we're getting to the point where our deficit spending is more than GDP in an annual year. It's a real problem that we have in Washington. I've always said this has a spending problem, and hopefully Republicans, when we get in control, can stop that.
Oh, Greg, you crazy. It's Putin's fault. Come on. Haven't you listened to the White House propaganda?
Or COVID's fault.
The reason we're paying more at the pump, the reason inflation's going on, and the reason we may have food shortages coming up is Russia. It's all Putin's fault. I mean, this is classic wag the dog and then blame it on a foreign adversary. They're literally trying to make the entire country think that all of our financial woes right now are somehow Vladimir Putin's fault. You've seen them. The sound bites are coming from Jen Psaki, from Biden. This is what they're using, the social media influencers. It's all Putin's fault. This is way off subject, but before we go, because we're almost out of time, I got to get you on this one. And it does have something to do with Russia, even though the story had nothing to do with Russia. and you know what I'm talking about. President Donald J. Trump announcing today he's officially suing Hillary Clinton, the campaign, and the DNC over the Russian collusion hoax. And all the media, actually, I'm amazed, none of them putting it on television, but online, Reuters, CNN, MSNBC, they've all got headlines saying that he is in fact suing, which means they have to pretty much cover the fact that the whole thing was a hoax. Your take on
Absolutely
your most famous Florida
100%.
resident.
100% was a hoax, and the mainstream media perpetuated that fraud on the American people for more than 2 years, and even their own handpicked attorneys and $50 million worth of taxpayer dollars to investigate it through the Robert Mueller investigation. He came before the Judiciary Committee, and I had the opportunity to question him, and he admitted that there was no factual evidence to support the contention that there was any collusion between the Trump campaign and Russia. And we all now know that all of that came from a dossier that the Hillary Clinton campaign and the DCCC paid for.
Right.
So absolutely, President Trump should sue them, and he should use the discovery process through the civil process to get more and more information that the American people wouldn't get otherwise.
Exactly. And Greg, come November, if Americans put Republicans back in charge, we hope to God you guys get a hold of this spending thing, and we better see some indictments and heads roll. And I'm talking Fauci, this Biden regime, Clinton, you name it, because we're tired of catchphrases and everybody just going, lock her up, lock him up, and then jack happens. We want to see action come January, if we put you guys back in November. I think you'll be one of those fighters, but by golly, you're going to need a lot more help in there.
And I think we're going to get it. You've got such a red wave that is coming, and conservatives have been getting elected. And since Trump's impact on the party, you're going to have a whole bunch of Republicans that have the America First agenda at the foremost of their mind when we take the House back.
Better happen. Greg Steube representing Florida 17th. As always, sir, thank you.
Good to see you.